Welcome, Deep Divers. It's Maddie from MadeUpByMaddie.com, bringing you the next episode of The Dive. For this week's transformation, my inspiration will be none other than Nina Simone's legendary look at Carnegie Hall. Singer, songwriter, civil rights activist, piano extraordinaire, Dr. Nina Simone is certainly someone that cannot be put into a box. Nina Simone not only holds a special place in my heart for her achievements in so many different areas, but we also share a birthday, so this is my dedication to her, and I hope I've done her justice. Today we are smack dab in the 1960s, taking the dive to 1965. Without further ado, let's jump in. And now for the headlines of 1965. Human rights activist and leader Malcolm X was assassinated on February 21, 1965 in New York City while making a speech to a crowded ballroom of listeners. March 8, 1965 marks the day when 3,500 Marines from the 9th Marine Expeditionary Brigade came ashore at Da Nang as the first wave of U.S. combat troops into South Vietnam. President Lyndon Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act into effect on August 6, 1965, which prohibited racial discrimination and sneaky loopholes to prevent minorities from voting in U.S. elections. And for you science enthusiasts out there, 1965 marks the year that Chinese biochemist Wang Yunlai was recognized as the first scientist to successfully create synthetic insulin, using 20 amino acids to produce the chemical chains. And now I'll be sharing the 7 albums I listened to during my week in 1965. On Sunday, I listened to A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I went back to John Coltrane to start off my week of 1965 just right. This jazz staple was recorded in just one take and released in January of 1965. Although I really enjoyed my favorite things, I feel this album feels more cohesive and is a bit more captivating, and I can't stop chanting, "A Love Supreme, A Love Supreme," after listening to the first track. It was a great start of my week for sure. My favorite tracks are A Love Supreme, of course, and Part 1, Acknowledgement. On Monday, I listened to My Generation by The Who. While I'm not admittedly the biggest fan of The Who, their debut album really delivered for its time. While there's nothing really groundbreaking about most of the songs besides the cool punk flair of the title track, the songs are well composed and they really do keep a great beat. My favorites are My Generation, The Kids Are Alright, and The Ox. And on Tuesday, I listened to Pastel Blues by Nina Simone. Where do I begin? Such a dynamic album. This really sets the stage for the candor that was to come from Miss Simone. This album boasts some of her most revered songs, at least by me. This album is a bit more sparse in its comparison to some of her others, showing that she doesn't need a lot of instrumentation to get her songs to sound really fantastic. In legendary fashion, she saves the best for last with her 10-minute rendition of Sinnerman, an African-American traditional spiritual song that just nails it. My favorites off this album are Be My Husband, Nobody Knows When You're Down and Out, and of course, Sinnerman. On Wednesday, I listened to Rubber Soul by the Beatles. This is studio album number 6 from the Beatles, which brings in the subtle psychedelia and everything else that makes the Beatles the best band in the world. From the first track, the punchy and fun Drive My Car, to the jangly finish of Run For Your Life, every song is perfect. This is said to be the shift of when albums started cutting out filler songs, becoming more contextualized, cohesive works of art. My favorites off this record: Drive My Car, Norwegian Wood, Nowhere Man, Michelle, In My Life, and The Word. On Thursday, I listened to Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited. At this point, this is my favorite Bob Dylan album so far. The energy is up, the songs are swaggering, and the snarl is nasty and cool. It's dirty and clean at the same time. Just listen to Ballad of a Thin Man if you need proof. It's another flawless album from Dylan, and there's not a single song to miss on this 9-track beauty. My favorites off this record: Like a Rolling Stone, Tombstone Blues, Ballad of a Thin Man, and Highway 61 Revisited. On Friday, I listened to Turn, Turn, Turn by The Byrds. So although I was familiar with the title track before I actually listened to the full album, It still gives me chills every time it starts. Despite not being originally rendered by the Byrds, their version is instrumentally and vocally outstanding nonetheless. I can't really think of a band that captures the sound as uniquely as the Byrds. The beautiful vocal harmonies paired with the chunky bass lines and distant guitar deliver sonic perfection. My favorites are Turn, Turn, Turn and Lay Down Your Weary Tune. And closing out the week, on Saturday I listened to Temptin' Temptations by The Temptations. Rounding out 1965 with this sweet gem of a record, this Motown classic brings soul and doo-wop home with its 5 smooth-toned vocalists at the helm. It's a lovely listen, and while not really peaking at any specific moment, it does not leave listeners bored. My favorites are Since I Lost My Baby, Just Another Lonely Night, and You've Got to Earn It. And now it's movie time. Okay, so starting off the week, I watched Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. This movie, it was a little hard to get into. If you like fast cars, wild women, this is the movie for you. There wasn't really much of a storyline. There was a lot of cool dialogue, a script that didn't really make too much sense, violence kind of like unnecessarily peppered in through the movie, but it was definitely a product of its time. I was entertained. It did feel like it dragged on a little bit, which is kind of weird considering the movie was pretty short. It was still entertaining to watch nonetheless. Okay, look, so the movie is camp, but it doesn't apologize for not being anything other than that. It's a great product for what it kind of claims to be. And then next I watched Sound of Music, which I'm getting chills just thinking about watching that movie. Again, this is another movie that I never grew up watching. I knew about, but I finally gave it a chance. 3 hours long, just very consistent with all movies in the 60s. But honestly, it didn't matter. The cinematography is gorgeous. The songs are divine. It's not boring. It doesn't drag. Again, amazing for a movie that is 3 hours long. The Von Trapps are cute, funny, entertaining. Maria, played by Julie Andrews, is also just a lovely, lovely character. I would go far as to say I'd be very amazed if you walked away from watching that movie not singing those songs, because it was that infectious. It's so good. All right, and next up is Help by the Beatles. This movie is a lot different than A Hard Day's Night. This story was really weird. From what I remember, Ringo has this ring and it's super sought after. I know I normally don't give the synopsis of the movie, but like for this one, there's really no, I don't know, maybe there is a plot and I just lost it halfway through. It's really fun to look at. It's not my favorite by far. It was okay. All right, and then for my spooky movie, it is The Nanny starring Bette Davis. Now, Bette Davis is someone that I feel a deep connection with. She's my favorite star of the 40s onward. She's such a strong woman, and I've seen probably about 20 of her movies to date. The Nanny was one I had never seen, nor had really heard about, so I gave this one a chance. The story is pretty good. This movie does drag a little bit for me. I do remember kind of losing focus halfway through. Not really uncommon for me. The movie definitely offers twists and turns and a surprise ending that I didn't even see coming. So I like the way it is set up, and Bette Davis, of course, she's top 5 actresses that ever walked the face of the earth. I don't think anyone could hold a candle to Bette Davis, especially anyone alive during her time. But the movie is not very memorable for me.
It's time for the big splash.
All right, so now it's time for my big splash recommendation. Now for music, this was a very, very tough decision. There was not a single album in 1965 that was not memorable, was not enjoyable. This was a really strong week in music for me, a really strong year in music. You had the Byrds, the Temptations, John Coltrane, the Beatles. It was so hard to make a decision. They were all so good. But if I had to make a decision, it would be Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited, which I believe to be my favorite Bob Dylan album. I had never heard the album all the way through before. There were a few tracks that I was already familiar with, but come on. Like a Rolling Stone, Tombstone Blues, Ballad of a Thin Man, and of course the title track. It's such quality considering Bob Dylan released this album as a trio of what would be considered his opus, the grand trilogy of his albums in the 1960s. It's not as folky as you would expect. It has the rock and roll, it has the folk, it has the melodicism, it has great lyrics as always from Bob Dylan. This album is hands down the best, and I highly recommend listening to it. Alright, so this one was an easy choice for 1965. The only movie that actually really stood out for me was The Sound of Music, and it wasn't the lesser of four evils, it was just such a good movie by itself. It's one of my favorite movies that I ever watched in my 60s challenge, and you must watch it if you haven't seen it already. And if you have seen it already, watch it again.
It's the look.
Alright, so we're going to talk about the look. So I finally was able to do a Nina Simone inspired look. So this was a very, very special makeover look for me. One of my new friends, Jackie, showed up for this, and we actually went on location, found a piano bar in Las Vegas so we can get that perfect shot. Nina Simone, not very big on foundation. She was more of a natural type of beauty. She did not wear a lot of makeup. In the early 60s, I would say she was heavier on her makeup. And then as the years went by, she became a more stripped down version of herself. And her music also reflected that rawness. I mean, Nina Simone she's always done her own thing. And one thing about Nina Simone is that critics try to put her in a box in so many different areas. And even to this day, is it jazz? Is it folk? Is it pop? Is it soul? Is it R&B? Like nobody knows how to pigeonhole her, and that's what makes her so amazing, is that there's really no way to describe what she does. But anyway, I'm done talking about Nina Simone because I can go on forever. So this look is Nina Simone at Carnegie Hall. This is a famous look of hers. I think she's only done it one or maybe two times. So again, light foundation, very lightly smoked out eyes, thick eyeliner, a nice big lash, nice chunky lash, and the rhinestones on her lash line and eyebrow. It is a very simple look, but the rhinestones really make it pop and make it memorable. Like I said, Nina Simone wasn't really big on makeup or theatrics in terms of her cosmetics, but this has always been a look that stands out to me when I search up pictures of her, so I was really happy to put this in the 1965 segment. And I think with the cost, the whole look was under $5. My model came in with the earrings that matched perfectly. The white dress I found at a thrift store. I believe I got that for $5, and everything else I already had. I did spray my model's hair black. She had a little bit of highlight action going on. And what else? The rhinestones I bought only because I couldn't find the rhinestones I already had, but they were perfect size. This was so much fun. This is probably one of my favorite looks in the series. It's not only the outcome of the actual look, but it was also because I was able to pay homage to Nina Simone. So that was really special and really important for me. And I think I did her justice. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. If you want, you can always check out my website, madeupbymaddie.com, where you can see my blog, view my portfolio. My site is available in English and in Spanish. And of course, you can contact me or book me, as I am a worldwide makeup artist and I would love to be a part of your world. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next time.